Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. This is going to be an episode I think is just going to bring a ton of value. Talking to these three gentlemen over the last couple of weeks about just what we want to do with this episode and things. I'm just really excited about it. I think it's going to help a lot of people out, and hopefully we're going to go a little bit deeper in some of the vague conversations that we usually have when it comes to being an out-of-state investor and what you can do here in Indianapolis. But I got three just amazing guys on here that are going to help me out with this conversation. We got Ernesto Hernandez, Dan Perez, and Bo Kim. Some of my favorite people to definitely connect with when it comes to out-of-state investors. And I know they've definitely have built quite a reputation as the go-to people, along with some other ones out there of like, hey, I have a question about investing in Indianapolis. I live in Colorado or Florida or California, wherever. Help me out. So hopefully we'll be able to do a little bit of that on this episode. So first of all, gentlemen, thanks a lot for joining me. Really appreciate your time. I know for the Cali guys, it's kind of early as we're recording this and everything, but really appreciate that. And what I'd like to do is just kind of starting off with is if you guys can go ahead and just kind of introduce yourself a little bit and then give us a little kind of just update on kind of what you've done in Indianapolis and that type of thing before we start rolling into the episode. So Ernesto, let's start with you, man.
Good morning. Yeah, it's very early. As you can see, the sun is rising behind me. I'm Ernesto. Most people know me for having started the Indianapolis Out-of-State Investors Facebook group. It has grown rapidly. I feel like even more recently, people keep sharing it with their friends and family, which is fantastic. In terms of what I've done in Indianapolis, I've done a little bit of BRRRR. I had an Airbnb, and I am currently focusing on fixing and flipping. So I have three of those in progress right now.
So awesome. Dan, how about you?
Yeah, Dan Perez, and I've been investing in Indianapolis with my better half, Kelly Perez, for about 2 years now. We're actually coming up on our 2-year anniversary of purchasing our first property later this month, so big milestone for us. We have accumulated about 85 rental properties in Indianapolis, and we have done a little over 10 flips at this point. So rental properties and cash flow buy and holds are our bread and butter, but we do deviate from that slightly based on what the market's giving us. We do dabble in a couple other markets passively, but Indianapolis has been our number one go-to market, and we look forward to expanding in the upcoming years.
Awesome. And Bo?
Hey guys, excited to be here. My name's Bo. I've been investing in Indy coming up on 3.5 years, I believe. Mainly focusing on residential 1 to 4 units. So in Indianapolis, my rentals consist of single families, duplexes, and a 10-unit apartment. And I've done the BRRRR strategy, fix and flips, seller financing, and various creative financing strategies to scale up my portfolio.
So awesome stuff. Yeah, like I said, number one, thanks a lot for joining me, guys. But I think if you're listening to the show, these are the guys that you want to talk to, connect with, along with a lot of other people. When you are on, Ernesto mentioned the Facebook group, the Out-of-State Investor Facebook group and stuff, like definitely look into that and just connect with people on there. And really what we want to talk about a little bit too, we're going to kind of do 2 different shows with this. So we decided to break this into 2 different episodes. Our first episode, we're going to kind of talk about maybe just kind of the offensive side of the business and what you can do to kind of set yourself apart in Indianapolis and, building relationships, that type of thing. Then we're going to do another episode on kind of the defensive side of the business. So mitigating risk and due diligence and all that fun stuff. So Ernesto thought we should do the due diligence stuff first. I was like, no, let's start with the positive and we'll go to the negative. That's the way my personality works, but no. So guys, when people start thinking about, investing in Indianapolis, the first thing they always hear is like, well, you need to build relationships and you need to, do this and find your team and stuff like that. And a lot of people have that conversation and a lot of people talk about that, but what does that really mean to you guys? If like, when you're looking to build your team, I'd really like to get into like some action steps that people can do to actually go out there and like, when you talk about building your team, doesn't mean just coming out here and, having as many meetings as you can and stuff like that, but actually some action steps that people can take to really get in and kind of knowing who they can work with. So I know, Dan, you and Kelly have you've kind of started talking about a lot of this lately and stuff. So let's start with you, man, and just kind of get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I know people can overcomplicate it when they're trying to build out their team because there are so many moving pieces. I think we probably have up to 10, 20 people on our team as of now. But when we first started, we really tried to make it simple for ourselves and say, all right, if we're going to be long-term successful at this, what are the groundwork pieces that we need to put in now for future success? And for us, where we started, it was with someone that can source us deals, someone that could help us analyze deals, and then someone that could fund the deals. And if you can get those three pieces in place, you're going to set yourself up for success, and the other pieces can fall into place at a later time. So what does that mean? We were looking to wholesalers and agents, trying to find who could help us source some deals and at least help us educate us a little bit on the market when we had questions about certain areas. The next step for us was figuring out what type of property manager we want to work with, because different property managers are good in different parts of the city, whether it's A, B, C, or D class. And then lastly, we needed to find some lenders that can give us the money to take down these deals that are being sourced. So in order to do that, what we did is we reached out to other investors, because I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I didn't want to have to put in more work than was needed. So what I did to expedite that is I was reaching out to other people such as Ernesto and Bo and a lot of the other active investors in the community, saying, who are you having success with? Would you mind sharing some of your resources? And we'll build a team from there. And so I think to really break it down for the listeners, just find your core few people to help you find those deals, help you analyze them and steer you in the right direction. That's your property manager. And then lastly, make sure that you do have your funds lined up. Because as a new investor, I know it sounds sexy to say, oh, take down a deal, and if it's a good deal, you'll find the money. I think that's a little misleading as a newer investor. So start educating people on what you're looking to do in the market, and start lining up those funds so that you have the confidence to put in the offers when they do arise.
Yeah, I think one of the things you put in there too, of like, kind of finding that core four, like the way that you put it and stuff like that, that doesn't mean that it has to be like, I'm going to select these four people or work with this team or whoever it is, and that's how it's always going to be. I think if you just kind of find some people that you like and you want to work with, like from the start, like that's okay. Cause you're going to hear stories of like, oh man, maybe Dan got a better deal than I did and stuff like that. That's okay. Are you getting deals? Are you doing what you want to? Don't get caught up on like, does somebody have a better team than me? That's going to come down the line as you start building relationships and working with other people. So figure out who you can work with and who you like, who you match up with first of all, and then kind of go from there, and then you can branch out from there. So Bo, what are your thoughts on that? Of kind of like, you might have the beginning team and stuff like that, but it's going to expand as you really get into the market and stuff as well.
Yeah, just piggybacking off what Dan mentioned, I'm actually going through this process again right now because I'm looking to enter a new market specifically for multifamily. So what I did when I was starting out at Indy is I made a short list by reaching out to other investors, going on Bigger Pockets, and seeing what name really pops up. And I really started with the property manager. So I really focused on property management because I wanted to build a buy and hold portfolio. After I got a short list of a half a dozen per se, then I would, wake up, call Indianapolis. You guys are 3 hours ahead. So before work, I'll be making calls. And, some people with the notable reputations, maybe I didn't, jive with, or other people where, some investors were like, I don't know about this property manager, but when I talk to them, I have a really good feeling. So it really, to each their own, right? You can't really say, hey, I have a good experience with this property manager, so everybody else is going to have a good experience. It's very different. So you want to definitely reach out to them yourselves, even though other people have vetted for them. And I personally say go out there and meet them in person as well. And what I've noticed is with property managers or other vendors as well, I feel like you have one first impression and then, obviously you build relationships. So if you're a total new investor, please don't reach out to vendors and be like, hey, I want to start real estate investing. What should I do? Because I actually get that question a lot. So I hope that you do enough homework on your own to get a little bit more clarity in terms of what you're looking for, so that you're not totally going to vendors with zero knowledge, because vendors are busy, especially the good ones, and the rock stars are busy. So make sure that you can show them that you're going to put in a little bit of effort as well and meet them halfway as you continue to grow and scale.
Yeah. So I think, one of the things you said there too, of like kind of figuring out who you jive with and stuff like that, I think it's big, and figuring out what they can do. I know sometimes I'll connect somebody with a property manager that maybe that property manager, all they do is just property manage, but they're really good at it. maybe that's not maybe what Bo really needs. Maybe he needs somebody that is a property manager that has their own crews to do, construction and do all this, but he might have to pay a little bit more for it. So it all depends on what you need at that moment and kind of where you're at. So those are the conversations that you need to be having. Just because somebody works for Ernesto might not work for Bo because he might need different stuff. So asking these questions and things are huge. And I know, Ernesto, you've been able to come out here and you made, quite a few trips out here to Indianapolis to, check on things, build those relationships, and, kind of figure out what you need for your teams and stuff. So, Bo mentioned that as well, like coming out here and meeting people. How big of an advantage of that is like when you come in and just seeing the city, but then also to help build those relationships and figure out who you do jive with?
It's been huge. I took some notes based off what Dan and Bo said. And again, I think the purpose of today's conversation is to go a little bit deeper into some of these topics. So I will come back to the whole trip situation, but a few things that really stand out for me that both gentlemen said is getting clarity. Somebody approaching Bo and like not even knowing what strategy they want to deploy while in Indianapolis. It's almost like, well, I'm pretty motivated right now to be an investor, but I don't know exactly what I want to do. I find myself having those conversations as well. So there's a saying by Tony Robbins that's pretty popular. It's clarity is power. And that, even for me, from an ownership perspective, like when I see something that goes wrong with a project, like a recent one where the carpet that was selected was not quite what I was expecting, it's not anybody's fault but my own, because I didn't clarify specifically which type of carpet. I see carpet on a scope of work, and I just assumed it was going to be something that I was going to like. So just getting clear on the specific strategy that you want to focus on, and that goes with everything. So Dan also said, finding the type of property manager or the type of contractor, like getting really, really clear and communicating that as best as you can is really going to help you go a long way. Secondly, on the networking piece, there's a right and a wrong way to network. I will say things that worked for me. Couple things that I did early on is I know that Cyria has their main meeting like every first Thursday of the month. I'm not sure if they still do that. I haven't been able to attend those recently, but I think my first two trips when I learned about that, and I learned that from, I think Sterling Davis shared that with me, that's when Cyria meets. It's a fantastic opportunity to meet a lot of people and a lot of big players in the city at one of the biggest RIAs that there is. So that was super helpful to me. I will also say if I'm a newbie, or really for anybody, I still, I like to kind of recap what I learned while I was in the city. Even years later, this last trip last month, I popped into a couple of used appliance stores, took some photos, took some videos, shared that with everybody. Hey, everyone, this is what I learned. Here's a couple of resources that might work for you. I ended up finding a steal of a deal on a refrigerator and stove setup for like $600 delivered. Like, you can't beat that. So doing things like that. Lastly, you touched on this, and so did Bo, I think, a little bit, but finding your people. I think it was Sunitha. We were hanging out. Sunitha Rao, for anybody that doesn't know, we had a little get together last summer with another investor. So just people that I've met over the years, but I can't stress enough like how important it is to find your people. Like, Dan has a contractor that he loves and works for him. Bo has a really, really good relationship with everybody at FS Houses. Somebody else's people are not your people. And once you find your people and then you have your team, that should really help expedite things for you. So, wanted to go a little bit deeper on some of the things that sometimes we go over at a high level.
Yeah. And I think on that note too, of just even not finding your people and your team, Ernesto, you just talking about this, of finding your strategy too. It's kind of funny when you're somebody, you're looking at it from my standpoint of like, Bo will put out a property like, hey, I just flipped this property. And then Dan puts out a flip property or something like that. And then all of a sudden we're like, all right, here it comes. Like, every out of state investor, they're going to want the same thing. Like, hey, I want to find a flip that I can make 25K on. And it's just like finding your strategy and kind of, we all know that in this business, it's so easy to get distracted by every little thing. I know I'm good at buying and selling houses. I will still get distracted tomorrow by something else. It's going to happen. So being able to figure out kind of what that strategy is. So like Ernesto, what's your advice for people on that of, you already kind of touched on it, but like not just finding your people and your team and stuff like that, but also finding your strategy that, hey, I'm going to stick with this for a little while and see how it works. And it might change down the road, but finding that strategy for me right now, what's your advice on that kind of piece?
Yeah, I think, and that's really kind of the first thing that I recommend that people do before you start investing. And it sounds really cheesy, like really like think of, years down the road, begin with the end in mind. Why are you doing this? And different people are different phases in their life that should focus on different strategies. So for some people, it's probably more, advantageous to be flipping. For some people, they're at a certain either time in their life or they work a certain schedule, they have certain resources where rentals is right for them. So just because something is right for somebody else doesn't mean it's right for you. So the sooner you get clarity, which we come back to a lot because it's such a common component of why things go wrong, the sooner you can find that clarity. And then the other thing is, being a good customer. Everyone's looking for an agent that'll serve them well, or manager, contractor, but being a good customer, meaning as it relates to this example, like if that's your criteria and that's what you said you're ready and able to commit to, when somebody drops that in your lap, you better take a swing, because there's only so many times that somebody like you guys were like, hey, Ernesto, you said you were looking for X, Y, and Z. We found something that kind of more or less checks your boxes. You say no to that. You say no to that a couple times, and all of a sudden you're going to find yourself not getting responses to emails and phone calls. So,
yeah. It happens, especially when you have like such a competitive market like this, where people, you really do have to do something to set yourself apart to be able to make sure your offer looks good, to make sure you have like that, you're putting your best foot forward for those, relationships and things like that. So Dan, when it comes to that, I think you and Kelly do a really good job of it. And we've kind of talked, actually before we jumped on this call, we were kind of talking on it, or a little bit of too, of just like, sometimes you get those people that, I'm sure you get people all the time, for all three of you guys, that are reaching out and saying like, hey, send me your best contractor for this, or, send me your electrician, or, hey, who's your, hook me up with your property manager. Like when you have investors coming at you like that, because you guys have established yourself and you guys have good relationships yourself, and you have people that are kind of wanting to get in those relationships, what do you recommend for those investors out there that are trying to put their best foot forward to kind of say, hey, I need a little help on this, other than just like asking for it? Do you have any advice for them of like kind of the right way to go about that?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people see other investors, and I fell into this same, issue when I first started. Was I would look at people like Bo, honestly, like I still look up to him. But when I first started in this business, I saw his podcast, I saw the things he was doing, and it looked easy to me. And I was expecting that same treatment back from other people, without realizing the foundation and the hard work that Bo had put in the 2 to 3 years prior to me coming in. And I think that's one thing that everyone needs to understand, is it's not going to be easy at any point in your journey, especially when you're starting. You have to prove yourself. It's almost like going to high school. You're that freshman. You have to prove yourself to the older players. You have to prove yourself over and over again and build that reputation. And what Kelly and I wanted our reputation to be was being decisive and action takers. We didn't want to be tire kickers ever. Even if it meant the deal was going to be a little slim, we still took it down in the beginning because we needed to build that reputation that we took down deals. And how did we do that? We knew our numbers. So we spent about 6 months just learning the market. So when a good deal did pop up, we would act immediately. And it was tough to get our teams in there initially, because we're a new player in the game. People don't want to really bend over backwards for us. But as you get more and more deals under your belt, not only does your confidence go up in yourself, but your confidence from your team surrounding you, knowing that you will take down the deal, inspires them to go out and put together a free scope of work for you just on the drop of a hat. And that's where I think I differentiate, and Kelly, how we differentiate ourselves from other investors is, if you send me a deal, I can get my inspector, my GC, and my agent through there within 24 hours, no questions asked. Yeah. But it didn't start like that. So you need to put in the work up front, build the confidence in yourself, and let your team build confidence in you, and things will just get easier with every single deal.
Yeah. I think it's one of the things that's kind of tough, is you kind of an entrepreneur or a new investor where you see somebody, you're around other people and you see some people doing some pretty big stuff and some pretty remarkable stuff. And you're like, man, why isn't this easy for me? Or why can't I just jump in and have, 5 properties tomorrow and stuff? But you realize it takes time, and it's a grind, kind of no matter what level you're really working at. Bo, I want to turn this over to you a little bit, because I think the first time that you and I met, we had a conversation, and I think you just got your first property in Indianapolis, and you maybe had 2 at that point or something, but you're kind of just like, yeah, I'm just looking to get maybe a couple this year. And then like I talked to you 6 months later, and you're like, yeah, I've got 1 every month. I got 6 in the first 6 months. So when you're somebody like that, that's like, we talked about a little bit of, kind of finding that right strategy and kind of sticking to that and, building the right team and stuff. But then also kind of comes into like knowing your timeline a little bit, coming back to that whole clarity thing of you do need to be clear on your timeline and knowing what you can do, knowing your numbers and stuff. For you in that situation where you kind of just went with it and ramped it up pretty quickly, what's your advice on somebody of like kind of knowing like, hey, I can handle this. I know that my numbers are good. I know that I can do this versus like, am I going too fast?
Yeah, so I think to address that question, I want to share a little bit about my strategy going in because it definitely shifted and it's okay to change. Like in the beginning, Ernesto mentioned begin with the end in mind. I wholeheartedly agree with that. You definitely want to make sure that whatever you're building is conducive of the lifestyle that you want to live. I feel like 5 years, 7, 10 years from now. So for me at that time, it was all about turnkey properties because I was working at a CPA firm and I'm sure Dan can attest. It's a grind. You work a lot of hours, especially during busy season. And I just felt like I wanted to spend my free time with my family. I didn't want to be doing real estate during my free time. So I was trying to just buy turnkey properties. And so like Dan, I just underwrote a ton of properties. Whenever a turnkey provider sends me a deal, I just underwrote it. So I really got strong with my numbers. And I bought my first 4 and then I quickly ran out of money. So as you can imagine, once you get the taste of real estate, you want to do more. It's kind of addicting. And I realized after I got my first 4, I was confident. I feel like I was getting better at running my numbers and buying deals. So I raised my first private capital, quote unquote, because there was this deal that I didn't want to pass up. And I was just talking to one of my buddies who's also a fellow investor. I didn't know he was a private lender. And I said, hey, I have this, smacking good deal. I don't know what to do with it. I'm afraid to use hard money lending because I didn't really know what that was at that point. And he's like, hey, I'll fund the deal. So I bought that property with private lending. So I really learned as I go. So that's why, Brian, when you and I had breakfast, I think in Carmel, just starting out, I wanted to buy 1 that first year, 2 the next year, 4 the year after. I just wanted to double every year. That was my strategy. But it kind of snowballed from there because the more you do deals, I feel like it's building brick by brick. The more vendors know you and the more deals that get sent to your inbox and the more you recognize, hey, out of the 100 that you look at, maybe 2, 3 are worth putting an offer and potentially taking down.
Yeah. So, and on that note too, and Bo, you mentioned that. I want to touch on this again and, kind of coming into the, having clarity, but then also setting yourselves apart from other people. When I look at you guys, I know that you guys all kind of underwrite your own deals. You guys know your numbers and can kind of analyze all those deals. I might not always agree with how you analyze it, but you guys can all underwrite your own deals. You can all do that analytical side. I think that's something that maybe, some of the newer investors, that's where the big struggle is that they rely a little bit on other people to give them those numbers. And I think if you're able to kind of set yourself up and kind of learn how to do that process and learn how to do your numbers, and then take kind of what other people are saying too and kind of mesh those together, especially starting off, and then eventually like, hey, I'm not like, I don't know. That's the way I analyze. Like, I don't trust other people's numbers at all. Like I want to do my own numbers and this is how it is. So Dan, can you talk about that a little bit of just like how important that is for you guys being able to run your own numbers and not like kind of rely off of what, one wholesaler or an agent says they think it's worth. It's what you think it's really worth.
Yeah. And I actually had two investors. We have a clubhouse call every Monday night that I think has gained a lot of traction with new investors because it's a very informal, open discussion. We're up there to just try to add as much value as we can. If we don't know an answer to a question you have, we'll go and look it up for you and get back to you. But what I think is really neat is I had 2 investors approach me this week after the call and say, how do you approach learning the market? And I said, it's very simple. You just have to, it all comes back to you have to put in the work and just take action. What I tell people and what I told them to go do this week is their homework assignment, go underwrite 50 deals and tell me how much more you know that market. You will know it a lot more. You're also going to get excited about that market now. It's going to become a habit. And now during your free time, you're going to be on Redfin, you're going to be on Zillow, and you're going to learn what homes can appraise for or sell for in certain markets and what the rents are. Well, once you have those 2 pieces of information, you can back into what does your all-in need to be for for you to cash flow and potentially pull out your money if you are using the BRRRR method. So that's just a simple task that I tell everyone I talk to, go underwrite 50 deals. And if you can't do that in a week, I don't think you're serious enough, to be completely blunt, because the three of us on this call, I guarantee you, I know Kelly and I alone put in 50 hours a week combined on real estate. I'm one of your competitors, and there's thousands of us out there. So just keep that in mind. Put in the work, learn what homes are selling for, what they'll appraise for, and talk to other investors. I surround myself with about 7 to 10 just bulldogs in the Indianapolis market, and we're talking constantly. Hey, I got this appraisal in this neighborhood. Hey, prices are jumping up over here. Hey, I actually got a lower appraisal in this neighborhood because they're pulling comps from this block. When you have proximity to people in your network that are doing the same thing you're doing or a little bit ahead of you, you're just naturally going to want to do more and more. And so back to your question, to learn the market, just start underwriting the deals, look at comps, get familiar with a couple small pockets of the city, and then expand once you have familiarity with a couple of the neighborhoods that you like invested in.
Yeah. I really like that of like picking little pockets, I like even just take the city and, put it into quadrants and pick one quadrant, focus on that if you need to, or certain neighborhoods and things, really to focus on that. So Dan, you did mention too, of like, you said, I'm your competitor, like people people that are looking to do this, like they're going to be competing against you three for property. They're competing against me for properties and stuff like that. So it is competitive out there. You need to be able to kind of, be able to underwrite and be able to kind of figure out what deals make sense for you. We're paying more for properties right now than we did last year. If you look at like the way January, the median property price from January of last year to January of this year, it was up 19%. Like that's crazy for January, which is usually a slow month and stuff. But so Ernesto, go ahead.
And one last thing on that is, I've heard other people saying, well, prices are going up, so I don't think the deals are there. And I think you do need to be cognizant of the fact that the appraisal values on the back end are also going up. Rates are extremely low right now, so people are able to pay a little more. So us BRRRR investors, I think it's actually gotten easier because the appraisal values are actually higher right now. So if you can get in at a decent price, just make sure that, because the rents are not rising as much with the moratoriums and such. So be careful, still make sure that they cash flow. But I think from a BRRRR perspective, which is what the three of us do, I think that it's actually become fairly easy because the appraisal values and the comps are easily there now in a lot of the different neighborhoods. And the last thing I'll say on that before we go over to Ernesto is build your brand too. Like I had a vendor reach out to me the other day and said, hey, I heard you're the mayor of Bean Creek. I had this property pop up. Are you interested? It's little things like that. Like I used to joke about, hey, Bean Creek. Now it's popping off and doing larger things than what I even expected. So just try to pick a couple pockets where people know, hey, if a house pops up there, send it to Ernesto, send it to Bo, send it to Dan. And it's kind of cool because I'm actually closing on quite a few properties in Bean Creek next week, simply because someone said, hey, I heard on a podcast you love Bean Creek. Are you interested? I'm looking to sell these properties.
Yeah. And you can brand yourself as an investor of like, hey, I'm the Bean Creek investor, or that's like doing stuff like that. Like that makes sense. I've always say that no matter what you're doing in life, talk about what you're doing and what you want to be doing. And somebody's going to remember that. Somebody's going to hear it and go from there. So we're running a little bit low here on time and stuff. As we get into this, Ernesto, I want to go to you first. We talked about this being, that we are all competitors and you're competing against this, but it's also a community where we all kind of, we help each other. We look out for each other. We do want the best for each other. I don't want to see, I might be competing against Ernesto for a deal. I still, even if he beats me out for it, I still want to see him do well with it. That's the goal for all of his stuff. But since it is so competitive, and maybe we can go kind of around the horn here, just as we kind of wrap up this first episode. Ernesto, we'll start with you. Of like, what are some things you can do to kind of set yourself apart as an investor in this market to have your offers even be heard, to be competitive with your offers and that type of stuff if you are looking for a property?
That's a good question, and it kind of tees up what I really wanted to squeeze in here. Yeah. I think one of the threads that brings people like Bo and Dan and I together is that we sincerely get like joy from watching new people do well. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people that approach us the right way, and there's a lot of people that approach us probably the wrong way as well. And that's not to make anybody feel bad, but some people are better at it than others. With that said, I think I think the example that I would end with is I'm going to use a real person that I know. His name is Asil. Seal was informally crowned the rookie of the year for 2020 in our Indy Facebook group, because he just had such a monster first year. But when you kind of pay attention to the shift that happens between someone like in the Seal and then being on the opposite end of the spectrum to somebody like Dan, Seal didn't make a lot of money on his first deals. Like, he'll be the first one to openly admit that it just wasn't that lucrative for him. But he was he's very humble. He was willing to make mistakes. He took action, and to watch him kind of make that shift from not being super lucrative on the front end and in the beginning of his Indy investing career. He had the right mindset and the right approach in networking with other people and proving that he was applying the advice that was being given to him. And so that's where some new people might be. But eventually, as you kind of prove yourself and you kind of build a reputation for being a reputable and reliable buyer, you shift to someone like a Dan Perez, who's on this call, where he had an example recently where somebody was offering some properties in Bean Creek, and he made an offer, and it wasn't the highest and best, but he's got a reputation for, like, he's going to close. And for people that are kind of on a short time frame and need to close that deal, what that shows is that as you prove yourself and you earn that reputation for being someone who is known to follow through, that works to your advantage, because your reputation is so strong where you don't have to be the highest and best because you're going to close when you say that you will. So for someone that's like brand new and thinking of themselves, or like, how does that progression happen? Those are a couple names that I think are relatable in kind of their journey through the market.
Awesome. So good stuff, man. Dan, how about you? What's something that people can do to kind of set themselves apart right now in this competitive market?
Treat your team really well. Be cognizant of their time. Don't have them running around, especially with GCs. Don't have them running around just bidding against each other, having 4 people go out to one job site and just always taking the lowest number. It's not always the right choice, but being respectful of your team's time and efforts, thanking them and being appreciative of what they're doing for you, because they don't have to do it. And then the last thing I would say is do what you say you're going to do. And I think that's one thing that vendors struggle with. I think that's one thing that investors struggle with. This whole real estate industry, I think it's hard to find people that will just do what they say they're going to do. And if you can do that, and if you can pair up with vendors that'll do it, you're going to be wildly successful.
So awesome, man. Could not agree more. Bo, how about you?
Yeah. To set myself apart, now that Bean Creek is taken, I'd like to christen myself as the mayor of Christian Park and Emerson Heights and Irvington. No, I'm just kidding. But
just take them all. Just everything over there, the southwest. Yeah.
Exactly. But no, I really agree with a lot of what Dan just mentioned. Is what I was going to say is just do what you say you're going to do and treat your team right. And just to add on that a little bit, when I was out there for the Indy Symposium back in November, I was driving around with an agent, and I was also talking to a contractor. And the contractor was mentioning how he was sent out to do a bid, and the investor tried to negotiate over a couple $100 on the entire scope that was literally like $60,000. And at that point, the contractor was pretty turned off and decided not to proceed with that project. And that was just another, reminder for me. To me, it was very obvious and common sense, like almost, not to do that. Look at the big picture. Don't sweat the small stuff. But I can definitely see for a newer investor, $200-$300 might seem important at the time. But my personal advice would be to focus on the big picture. And if your numbers still work with that $200-$300 that's added on, then maybe with working through this contractor and building the relationship, that person is going to show up on time, really take care of the work, not cheap out on the materials, because there's 100 different ways to lower $200-$300 by skimping on the materials. Yeah. All of our investors could probably attest to that. So just really focusing on the big picture is what I'd like to kind of share.
Yeah. So great stuff, fellas. Awesome. This is a wrap for this first episode. We're going to come back with episode 2. We're kind of focus a little bit more on the defensive side of stuff, and being, kind of that defensive side of being an investor and what you need to look out for. But kind of wrapping up this show, I think 2 words just kind of stand out to me of this, of making sure that you have clarity on what you want to do, and then being a trustworthy person to come through and actually do it. So with that, this is a wrap for this episode of the Indy Investor Pod. We'll see you guys next time. Take care.